So I was depressed after Super Tuesday, as you can imagine, because to me, the stakes of this primary are incredibly high, and I was alarmed to see the increased odds of choosing a disastrous candidate like Joe Biden to run against Trump with all of the human misery Trump's re-election would ensure. So on Wednesday, I spent my morning in a coffee shop in the French Quarter of New Orleans, where I live, reading Don Quixote, because I had never read it, and I needed something a little apolitical to take my mind off things. And as I was leaving, a current affairs reader came up and he introduced himself, and he said that the book I was reading was very topical. And I hadn't thought of it that way, topical. And then he explained. Don Quixote, the old, confused member of the social elite who doesn't notice that the world has changed around him, is living in a fantasy of the past. Half demented, he fancies himself winning when he's losing, and when his delusional worldview comes into conflict with obvious facts, as when the giants he attacks turn out to be windmills, he simply modifies his story so that he can never be wrong, by saying a sorcerer must have turned the giants into windmills at the last minute to deny him his rightful victory. And that's the Democratic Party elite in general, and Joe Biden in particular. They still believe that everything operates according to the old rules. In 2016, it should have been evident that this was not the case. That Donald Trump violated every rule of decency and civility, brazenly flouted the most basic political norms, and then won. But like Don Quixote, instead of accepting that they had been wrong, trying to understand this new world around them, they simply made up news stories that allowed them to rationalize continuing to do the same thing. Trump was illegitimately put into office by the sorcerer Putin, not by their own failures to effectively counter his messaging. And in 2020, they're going to do precisely what they did in 2016. They're going to run an uninspiring establishment candidate with no clear agenda or reason for being in the race beyond self-advancement, whose criticisms of Trump ring false because of hypocrisy, and when they lose, again, it will not even cause them to finally wake up and see the windmills. Even as the party falls apart, they'll be clueless as to why. So here's my fear. A narrative right now is going to take hold that Bernie Sanders is on the outs, Joe Biden is rising from the ashes. Now this race is still technically close, but Biden has this momentum as top Democrats coalesce around him. And they're going to say, Bernie's revolution didn't happen. Everyone go home. It's time to get serious and pick Joe. People are temporarily going to forget what Biden is like. His name's just going to be a code word for moderation and to the everyman. The New York Times has gone hard after Bernie recently with a flurry of negative stories, and Bernie's going to have a tough time turning the narrative around before the next primaries. Democrats don't realize, though, that the only reason Biden appears strong is that they've managed to temporarily suppress discussion of all of the things that make him such a terrible general election candidate against Trump. I mean, yes, if we don't talk about his long history of involvement with all the worst policy blunders of the last 40 years, or the way he makes women uncomfortable, or his long history of outrageous lies about himself, or his son's shady Ukrainian gas money, or his inability to organize a campaign rally, or even complete a sentence half the time, or his total lack of answer to the question, how will Biden get Bernie's supporters, especially young people, to turn out for him? If we just bury all of that, then yes, we can make Biden seem like a reasonable choice. But those things don't go away. They're coming back, and they are going to hit Biden like a freight train the moment he faces Donald Trump. And as Biden did in 1988, and as he did in 2008, and as he did in Iowa, and as he did in New Hampshire, he will likely crumple before you know it. But we don't have to do this. We have a window, albeit a small one, to turn this around. Now, I hope you and everyone you know will do whatever you can to help elect Bernie Sanders. We can bring a worthy fight to Donald Trump, instead of trying to put up a relic of the most discredited brand of Democratic politics. We don't have to settle for Joe. We can have a campaign and a presidency in which we can truly take pride. It's Biden, not Sanders, who would be the risky bet. A Sanders presidency is nothing to fear, but a Biden nomination, certainly.